everyone. We're very happy to have Reverend Éric Hébert-Daly with us this morning to answer a few questions about our 3 regional councils. But before we do that, maybe we'll let Éric introduce himself.
Sure. So I'm Éric Hébert-Daly. I'm now 6 weeks into the position of Regional Executive Minister for these 3 regional councils. I was born in Oakville, Ontario. Grew up in Toronto and moved into Montreal and stayed in Quebec most of my life. I'm now living in Ottawa. I grew up in an Acadian family, so even though I was born in Oakville, the family spoke to me in French the whole time, and I had to learn English in order to go to school, which I did, of course, Roman Catholic school, because that was the family tradition. And then moved into the United Church as I started to see a growing number of issues I couldn't live with in the Roman Catholic tradition. And of course, my parents, being children of the Quiet Revolution, were very anti-church, and in fact were very angry with me for wanting to go to church on a regular basis. And so it was a bit of a tension in our household. And yet, despite all that, I have found myself called to ministry and did that. And I have to admit that my mother took it harder that I was becoming a minister than when I came out to her as a gay man. So it was a challenging thing, but there you go. So I've worked in politics, everything from an organizer to being the executive director of the federal NDP under Jack Layton. I've led an organization that's a conservation organization called the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society. And I was head of French ministries just before I took on this role. So that's a little bit about who I am.
Thanks so much, Éric. So we have a number of questions we've gathered from the 3 regional councils, and we're going to take turns asking you them. And we're going to do a separate video with some of the questions in French, and you can answer in French, but we'll do this one all in English. So the first question we received is, a number of years ago, we moved from presbyteries to regional councils. How has this change benefited the United Church of Canada?
Well, I think one of the challenges we have is that the change happened a few months before a massive pandemic, which didn't exactly help the process of getting to a place where we could know whether what kinds of implications that could have had. And I think as we're starting to move back into a more an always changed but post-pandemic era, I think we can have a better sense of whether or not that structure is working for us. But the church also has a system that is going to evaluate that in the coming years. And so I think we should wait and see how that plays out. But ultimately, I don't think structure is the most important piece of the puzzle. I think it's really about what we do and how we do it and how we work together and how we build connections with each other. The thing that I've heard most complained about over the years is that this loss of presbyteries has meant that we don't get to connect with one another as much. And so we need to find our new ways to do that and to not lose sight of the value of those connections. That was very, very difficult to do, obviously, during the pandemic. And so this is a key moment, I think, for us to be able to do that.
Thanks, Éric. My question is rather long and multi-faceted. So here it goes. What is your concrete and ground level vision for the future of the United Church in this part of Canada? Specifically, what do you think the church, regional councils, and pastoral charges should be doing to propose a way forward, given the facts that the population of the church is rapidly declining and will continue to decline? In our 3 regions, there has been no visible initiative by the leadership to initiate strategic discussions about this. Would it be useful to convene a discussion of delegates from all 3 regions to consider these issues? So sorry, that is long. I know you wanted to speak, so now
No, it's okay. There's a lot to this question, and I would say that this is the key reason why I am most enthusiastic about playing this role at this time. The National Church has embarked upon a strategic planning process, which is intended for the General Counsel office and was not intended necessarily to be an imposed process by which regional councils had to follow. But there is so much in what we've learned in that process. The vision around bold discipleship, daring justice, and deep spirituality is a great vision. But the question, once we have a vision like that, is how do you actually get there? How do you build towards that? And the General Counsel Office has set a series of different areas of work for a strategic plan. And in each of the 3 regional councils, we've agreed to sort of move down a path of strategic planning. And now the question is, how do we make contextual the ideas for growth and for efficiency and common good, for leadership and building leadership? How do we take all of those areas of work and make them work contextually in each of our regional councils? So I agree, you don't ignore the challenges that are being faced by the church right now. You don't just say, oh, we're going to turn a blind eye and we're going to be Pollyanna-ish and say, no, everything's fine, because that's not helpful either. But we do need to be very specific about the actions we take. And I think a strategic planning process allows us to set some objectives, to decide what those activities are to get to those objectives, and then to measure those objectives on a regular basis so that they're measurable. And I think that we're largely moving down that path in each of the different regional councils. Even in the first month and a half, I've seen an appetite and a desire for that. And I'm really excited about seeing where that goes. So yeah, I do want to bring people together around this, because that is what we need to do, and it needs to be owned by everybody. So it can't just be made by a small committee off in a corner and then presented as fait accompli. It has to be built together, and it has to be addressing what's true in each of our regions, and that's going to be a little different from one region to the next, and I think that's okay. But I'm really excited about that particular piece of work.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Eric. So my question is, what is the most efficient and effective way for a community of faith to communicate questions, concerns, and needs for support from our regional council executives?
Well, I think it's important to remember that there are small staff teams in each of the different regions, and each of those folks do have responsibilities that make sense for them to be a kind of an initial talking point. So in some cases, if it's an issue around pastoral relations, obviously there's a pastoral relations minister. If there's something that you're wondering about in terms of communication, or you're looking for a directory, or there are communication staff who I'm gathered with here, and there are folks in regions who are there to support different communities of faith, and I say this because every structure is different, right? So each regional council doesn't have exactly the same model. But if you're wondering, you can ask me, or you can ask a staff member, or you can ask the chair or the speaker of the assembly, depending on the region that you're in. And I think that those folks will know how to be of assistance, and those folks are very clearly listed on the website. And again, if you're not sure, you can always just check in with me, and I will direct you to the right person.
Thank you.